Hi, my name is Sarah Simpson-Taffer, and today my presentation will be over prosopagnosia. What is prosopagnosia? The definition of prosopagnosia is a neurological condition characterized by the inability to recognize the faces of people. It comes from the Greek word prospo, face, and agnosia, not knowing. People with prosopagnosia often have trouble recognizing faces they have seen many times, like those of family members, friends, and even their own faces in photographs. What causes this disorder? Prosopagnosia can be lifelong or acquired, and if it's acquired, it's usually by some kind of brain injury. Lifelong prosopagnosia is thought to result from developmental or congenital abnormalities that affect face recognition mechanisms. The fusiform, which we learned in the class, is a brain region related with people who are affected by this disorder. It's a region in the brain that is activated during facial recognition, and this region acts different with people with this disorder. Lifelong prosopagnosia does not have a clear diagnosis, although it's now thought to be some kind of a genetic condition that runs in families. In contrast to when it's acquired, which only usually happen when people have been in traumatic brain accidents, and it's very rare. I'm going to move on to the model, a very, very famous model of face recognition, and was the first one, I believe. And it's the Bruce and Young one. And this Bruce and Young model, this is the classic one, and since it has been published, there have been psychologists that have challenged their viewpoints, but this model proposed the following, in which was the initial encoding. Different aspects of facial signals like identity and expression are analyzed in parallel. It stressed that the difference between processing the identities of familiar faces via facial recognition units and unfamiliar faces via directed visual processing units. It's also suggested, as seen in the model, that there's some form of hierarchy in organizing components in a functional pathway. There is another model that came out after, there was a few, but this is another one that came out after the Bruce and Young model. This is the two-rote model of face recognition, and which was proposed by Bauer, but then adopted by Ellis and Young in 1990. And this model, I believe, goes into more depth within what occurs with facial recognition in the brain than the Bruce and Young. And this model differs as well. This one is one of the most accepted models in the face processing disorders. It includes that face recognition occurs within a single pathway, not two pathways or more, but it's all through the single pathway, which is the ventral visual cortex. There was some people were saying that it was like through the dorsal visual cortex, but now that has been proven wrong, and we know that it's through the ventral. And this model demonstrates how the ventral visual pathway is connected to the amygdala and can account for findings on prosopagnosia. This model involves the pathway that are responsible for face recognition. One pathway containing synaptic and biographical information about the face, about the seen face, and this is usually containing synaptic and biographical information, about the seen face. And then the second pathway is responsible for having an effective response to a face that is already familiar. Very interesting. And there's lots of articles about these two models and how they're different from each other. And this two root model um, was created in like of the Bruce and Young and was inspired by the Bruce and Young model. All of them were, because it was the original. So, what ability does prosopagnosia affect? What abilities can it affect? Yeah. So prosopagnosia can affect people's ability to recognize objects as well, such as cars and places. So if they get out of the grocery store, there's so many cars, they're going to have a hard time finding their own. They have problems remembering places and landmarks. Many people also have a difficult time navigating. And last but not least, recognizing faces is very difficult. And what are the signs that you have prosopagnosia? So how do you know you have it? And how do you diagnose this? So one of the signs is you are unable or very poor recognition of individuals and persons and in photographs. And when you meet somebody, you try to remember a hairstyle or an object in their hair, such as a bow or a distinctive feature on their face, because if you see them again, you're probably not even going to know who they are. So you try to really remember some kind of object on them. And another way you know you have it is you confuse characters and televisions far more than others. You struggle to imagine a person's face in your mind. And when you're being diagnosed, you may be asked to memorize and later try to recognize faces you've never seen before. Recognize maybe a famous person's face. Try to see similarities and differences between faces presented next to each other, and judge what someone's age might be or what expression they have on their face. How is prosopagnosia diagnosed? We just went over that. So, yep. And let's skip that. So early signs your child has prosopagnosia. I thought this was really interesting because if it's runs in genetics, you will know early on if you have it. And they have a difficult time recognizing people when they see them at a moment's notice. They approach strangers thinking they are approaching their parents. They have a hard time watching TV or even following what is happening on the screen. They are very attached to the parent in a crowded or public places. And they always kind of look for, another thing I noticed is like if you're pulling up to pick up your kid, they are always looking for that wave or that sign that it's you, or else they won't know it's you because they won't really know what your face even looks like. What is a treatment for this condition, which is what was one of the things I thought early on, like, how do we treat this? And sadly, there is no cure for prosopagnosia or any kind of treatment. There are techniques people can learn to make life easier that have this disorder. They develop strategies such as recognizing people by their voices, the way they dress, walk, or a distinction in their face. There is a lot of study now on facial recognition, and I hope one day there can be a cure and we can solve this phenomenon. The effects of prosopagnosia, in conclusion to all of this, the effects of prosopagnosia can cause on someone's life it's more than not just being able to recognize faces. A person with this disorder can be impacted by depression because of difficulty forming relationships and experiences with others that this disorder brings. It's hard to connect when you struggle to have eye contact with someone. A person with this disorder is more likely to develop social interactions and develop social anxieties, leading them to fear social situations. Depression, social anxiety, kind of wanting to be more introverted and stay home, and it can affect your career even when you're not able to recognize faces around you. Prosopagnosia is a really, really sad disorder, and I really do hope that one day we find a cure. And this has been one of the most interesting things I've learned this year because I had no idea that this was even real. until I learned it. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.